Okay, just one thing. You need to go see this movie. One, because it's one of the better science fiction and just plain big studio movies we have gotten in the past 10 years. And two, because I really want to see the sequel. I know, I want to get that out of the way. This is a great first half of a movie. And everyone who's praising it, as far as I'm concerned, probably not praising it enough. It does so many things well that modern movies aren't allowed to do well. That being said, I do have a few issues, which we will get to. Okay, so my first issue is just an issue in general that I have with modern movies. I mean, I've had this issue, and it's not a deal breaker. Again, nothing I'm about to say is a deal breaker. This movie is fantastic. Acting is good. Direction is good. The pacing is pretty good. My only complaint is what it does the ending, which will be the last part that I focus on in this review. But I've had time. I watched it in theaters. I saw it in theaters this weekend, and I also watched it at home on HBOMax. So I wanted to give myself time to absorb everything that was going on. And one of the things it gets right is it gets the balance just right for the villain. But the first thing that it gets right is the balance on the villain, Baron Harkonnen. In the two previous adaptations, which Dune has been adapted twice before, once by David Lynch, which he disowned due to, David Lynch may be my favorite director living today, but oh boy, that movie was a bad adaptation, and there are so many reasons for that. Some of which are him, but others of which are just But in that one, Baron Harkonnen was basically a horror movie monster, and then in the sci-fi miniseries, he felt a little too smooth. He felt a little too smooth and businessman-like. This movie actually gets the balance right, and it's the first time I felt like, oh, this is the Baron Harkonnen of the novel. So that's very good, and that's something very hard to nail down. Stellan Skarsgård, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He doesn't have that much screen time, but what he has on screen, he nails. But yeah. But here's the problem that I've had going back to the Lord of the Rings, and that is modern movie writers, they do not get the medieval feudal mindset, and they have characters acting like modern people in this, and they'll have them sometimes just briefly, sometimes just calling out what we see as flaws in that, or having a modern person's reaction, when that isn't how somebody back then would react to the situation. But it's hard to explain in a way, it's hard to explain, but it's something I can't put my finger on. But it's the difference between, like, say, and I feel like it's a thing that's happened in the past few decades where we don't teach about how medieval society worked and the great chain of being. So in modern movies, like, we have William Wallace fighting for some form of democracy and to end feudalism completely in Scotland, when the historical figure wasn't doing that. He was merely fighting for a return of the rights of the feudal lords to govern themselves, and he was fighting for one side in a Scottish civil war, and for Scotland to remain an independent kingdom, but the feudal society would still be in place. Or like for instance, contrast that with 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood, where Robin doesn't talk about democracy or any modern notions of freedom. He's fighting for his version of freedom, and that is the right to live under a just king who rules under a set of laws, and not just at his whim. But the idea of abolishing the king would never occur to him. Here they have people talking about who their new oppressors will be, about their freedom, and about their freedom just a little too much, and being that Dune is very much transporting, the novel Dune just basically takes the medieval feudal ideas of the great chain of being, for instance, and transports them into space. That feels a little disingenuous. It's like, nobody who grows up with this being the only type of society they know questions this. I mean, very few people do. That's why the few people that do are considered radicals and are considered among the great thinkers. That's because they had an idea that wouldn't occur to anybody. And it's like, for instance, and the way feudal lords are broken up, they're brought up to never question what their duty is. They see their duty and they do it. And that's very true of the character of Paul Atreides. He sees something that needs to be done, and he doesn't fight it. I mean, in the books he does try to get away from his destiny, but it's not in the sort of why do we have to go there sort of thing. And they give him a few lines that get, and the actor I can't remember the actor's name who plays Paul in this one, but he gives, and again, an extremely impressive performance. I really liked what he did with this role. However, the writing let him down in a couple scenes where he's going, why do I have to go here? And why do I have to be trained to be a noble? Again, that isn't how Paul Atreides' mind works in the book. It's sort of that whiny teenager thing that they give every whiny modern teen, and they don't seem to realize that he's someone who's been raised. The writers don't seem to understand that he's someone who's been raised from his birth to be a ruler, and he's been told, okay, these are the types of personal sacrifices you have to make to rule, and you're required to do them because this is where you fall in the great chain of being, and everyone in the great chain of being, you have duty to those below you and duty to those above you. And the medieval idea of the great chain of being that governed everything in a medieval feudal society was that society will just collapse, and you'll be letting down those below you if you fail in your duties. So it wouldn't have occurred to Paul to go, why do I have to go here? Why do I have to sit on the council and learn how to rule all this other stuff? And as I said, he's great in the rest of the movie, but there are a few lines here and there. I would have rated him just even, and at first I was like, oh, this guy is just as good as Kyle MacLachlan, but then the writing let him down, and I was like, oof, oh. So yeah, Kyle MacLachlan still just barely edges him out as the person that I see in my head when I read the books, when I visualize what Paul Atreides looks like. And the look of this movie, that's my other kind of gripe, but it's a gripe against modern movies full blown. And that is that modern films seem to be allergic to primary colors anywhere in their looks. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are great set designs, there are great ship designs, there are epic wide sweeping shots. This movie is epic with a capital E. However, no primary colors anywhere. It's all just blacks, grays, and brown. And that sort of off-oranges, off-brown sort of color that they use for the desert now. And it's impressive, but I feel like it would have been even more impressive if they had put some primary colors in the costumes. To me, it had a very monochrome look, and I don't know if that was deliberate or if, I don't know, it just seems to be the look every movie has, and nowadays we have the ability to show more colors than ever on screen, and yet every movie seems to have this, what I see is this very dull look, and it just leaves me going, yeah, okay, that's very impressive, but where are the colors? And it's like, in these opulent societies, people show off, one of the ways people show off their wealth and importance is by the colors that they wear. Even the poorer people, if they can afford it, they spend, in every society throughout human history, they spend it. In fact, the more primitive you go in a society, the more likely they are to show these colors, so it sort of seems counterintuitive to me that, you know, you're not showing. It just seems to me that, you know, I don't know, I would have liked to have seen some more color. That's the other area where I think the Lynch version kind of edges this one out. Is it captured more of the decadence of the society and more of just how much awesome wealth was flowing through this galactic empire that's controlled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. You get more of that sense because it's just this is probably a minor gripe to most people, so I'll stop going on about it. But the one thing that nearly tanked the movie is Hans Zimmer delivering what may be his most obnoxious score ever. I mean, it's the same score he's been giving us since Batman Begins. Every Warner Brothers movie has this score, whether it was scored by Hans Zimmer or not, and most Warner Brothers movies are. Since 2005, Hans Zimmer has been repackaging the exact same lazy score, and if you go to anything that's inspired by the Middle East, which, you know, Arrakis is, then you almost always hear over everything, and you can just envision a bunch of guys standing around in a recording booth yelling nonsense words at the top of their lungs to get that score. Well, it's that exact score, and to tell you the truth, I've been tired of it for years, but it reaches its pinnacle, and it goes from being tired and just cliched to being a full-blown obnoxious assault on your ears, because it never shuts up. Even in dialogue scenes, in a Dolby Atmos theater, where one of the things that I praised Dolby Atmos for in the past is that you can hear dialogue better. Not in this movie, because the score never shuts up, and oftentimes it's much louder than the spoken dialogue. Somebody will be saying something important, and you'll be hearing boom, 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 and you'll be like, huh? Boom, boom, boom. It's obnoxious. Hans Zimmer, I don't think he saw a frame of this movie. I think he just took a generic score, added some Middle Eastern stuff to it, stuck it in there, and just delivered them 2.5 hours of it, and just said, just throw it in wherever, and it was just thrown in wherever. And they just said, oh, well, we can't be bothered to edit this. We're in a time crunch. Let's just put the score over every single scene. Let's not shut up, and let's not shut it off at any point. And here's the thing, for you to appreciate film music, it has to not be there for some scenes. And there are scenes that it's inappropriate to score. This score doesn't know that. It may be the single most obnoxious score I have ever heard in my life, and it nearly ruined an otherwise great film for me. I would love to see a fan edit of this film that rescores it. And let's just say Hans Zimmer, Toto's score for David Lynch's version is in no danger of being knocked off its pedestal as one of my favorite film scores of all time, thanks to this. They really should have gone with another less lazy, less obnoxious composer. I mean, here's how obnoxious it is. At one point, Baron Harkonnen just wipes some sweat off his brow. That is all he does. Nothing else is happening in the scene. There is no threat to it, nothing. This symbolizes nothing other than if he's that sweaty, he should probably turn down the thermostat in his climate-controlled, spaceship. And what does the score do? It goes into the loudest Inception boom, boom, boom I have ever heard. I mean, what on earth is this? I'm sweaty, so boom, boom, boom. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around this. And then there's the ending. This movie feels so incomplete. And yes, I know that there are other movies that were shot in parts, the aforementioned Lord of the Rings. However, each of those movies, when you got to its end, you felt like it had told a story unique to that movie, and that its section of the story was done. This feels like it's all set up. It's all great setup, and it's all great setup for a great story, but now that it looks like we won't be getting the sequel, this is going to age horribly because it's just going to be the prologue to a great story. So, yeah, that's kind of a problem. And it just sort of ends in the middle of a scene. And I really think this is a letdown because there could have been a way to make it feel like this story had reached a natural end. The story for this film had reached a natural end point and we had accomplished something. Here's my thing. If they had just gone forward, all you would need is another 20 minutes or half hour. It's already 2.5 hours, so don't be afraid to make it a 3-hour film. Just have the first stage of Paul training, the first of the Fremen in the wielding way so that they can actually stand a chance fighting Harkonnen soldiers. Then they've already added in action scenes and dialogues that weren't in the book. So just have Paul, then his first Fremen have to be forced into a combat situation where they have to fight the Baron's men. They win against the Baron's men. It's their first victory. End with people praising Paul and shouting Moadib, and then like cut to Paul's vision of the coming jihad that's going to kill more than 60 billion people, and have him look worried about it. And that, to me, would have been a much better way to end this movie than just having Paul walking randomly in the desert, having them in the middle of a conversation, Paul saying, "This is just the beginning," and then just cut. And then it's just cut credits. Yeah, nobody I was with in the theater could believe that was the end of the movie. They were like, "That's it? That's it? That doesn't feel like a..." Yeah, whereas if you do it the way I thought of, and I thought of this instantly in the theater, if you did it that way, then it would feel like, okay, this is the setup for the coming conflict. Now the next movie is its own distinct story with the conflict going full blown. But yeah, so in that way, if the second half of this story doesn't get made, the Lynch version is going to and Lynch's version, I could do hours of video on all the flaws on that. So Lynch's version, though, I think, will age so much better if the incoming new management for Warner Brothers, now that they've been sold to Discovery, doesn't decide to make the sequel. Lynch's version will probably be the version that people will still prefer to watch, simply because it gets to a natural end point. But other than that, this is great. This is great. I kind of wish it had been a series on HBOMax, because I feel like an ongoing series is the better format for the Dune story. But this is a great adaptation. You should see it. I just have those minor complaints that I felt like I had to get out of the way because this movie is so great and it's being praised so much that I felt like But what stuck with me is they even managed to turn down Jason Momoa. Now, he's still not a good actor, and he's still kind of playing Jason Momoa. But they even managed to tune him down a bit so that I could stand him as Duncan Idaho, and they managed to gender flip a character and not make me completely mad. So, yeah. Go see this movie. Just be aware it's not perfect. Right? See ya.